Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming online, and I hope you are having a wonderful day. And today we are going to have our NBS Knowledge Lab webinar. And I'm your moderator. I'm Ben Choi. I'm currently an assistant professor at the Nanyang Business School. Today we are going to talk about a fairly exciting and, of course, important topic that is implementing sustainable practices in the digital era, strategies for businesses to thrive. Joining me today, we have three very, very important and knowledgeable speakers who are happy to share with us during their lunchtime with regards of their perspective as well as experiences related to this topic. So let me introduce you to them one by one. First of all, we have Abhiruchi Gadgil. She is a program manager, integration and energy management, ENGIE Lab Singapore. Avi, do you want to share with our audience briefly with regards to your background and so on?
Absolutely. Very happy to be here for this webinar. I am Abhiruchi Gadgil. I am bachelor's, master's, and PhD in chemical engineering related topics. I have been associated with either energy or energy intensive sectors throughout my career so far. Started my career in Norway with an aluminium industry, working on sustainability topics, on energy efficiency improvements, through novel design concepts for aluminum cells, material innovation topics, CO2 capture and retrofitting solutions as well. Then I did my PhD with our very own NTU, with the Energy Research Institute, in offshore wind turbine tribology, focusing on more contaminants on lubricants and offshore wind turbine related issues related to that. Followed by that, I did my postdoctorate with again NTU and with collaboration with Cambridge Cares on topics encompassing areas of adoption of green technologies, understanding of strategies for the hard to abate sector, and sort of their associated dependencies on several parameters related to sustainability. And currently, I work at ENGIE Lab Singapore. It's a research and innovation arm for ENGIE, which is a French giant in utilities and renewables as well. And I primarily manage research projects which involve topics around an energy management system, as well as e-fuels, which are essentially fuels derived from green sources. And primarily as a team, we are right now delivering proof of concepts for sustainable technologies. Our focus is on de-risking sustainable technologies, as well as some technical guidance on some innovation proposals. So that's briefly my background. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you very much. Very exciting indeed. Coming up next, we have Eugenia Ko. She is Global Head, Sustainable Finance, Wealth and Business Banking, Standard Chartered. Eugenia, can you share with us with regards to your background and your work?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. So currently my role as Global Head of Sustainable Finance, I cover the consumer private banking and small and medium business segment. So there are a couple of focus areas for us. On the, client side of things, we work very closely with the private banking clients and also some of the small and medium enterprises to really think about what it means to either pivot their portfolios or their businesses to capture, opportunities when it comes to the energy transition or also risks that could come about as a result of climate change. On the product side, we look at curating some of the more compelling investment opportunities for clients, all the way from mass affluent through to private banking clients when it comes to investments. So these could be either in your ESG funds, through to structured products. And then finally, we also look at the net zero program for the consumer side of the business. So for us, we look at how we can further decarbonize our mortgage portfolio.
All right, thank you very much, Eugenia. And finally, our gentleman, François Balland. He is the CPO Air Thales, Aerospace Private Limited. Can you share with us? How about you?
Yes, hi. Thank you, Ben, and good day to all. I'm delighted to be on this panel and have the opportunity to learn and share on this interesting topic. So a little bit about me. So I come more from an engineering background with specialty in real-time software and aviation. And recently I graduated from an executive MBA at NBS, which allows me to be in the alumni and join you today. So that was last year. Then I pursued a certificate in astrodynamics with the University of Boulder, Colorado. And next up, I'll be interesting myself more in the world of AI. So I'm embracing the lifelong learning as I have learned with NTU. So that's a little bit about me. So about the company. So I've been working for Thales in the aerospace segment in the past 15 years. And it allowed me to work in 5 different countries and in Asia Pacific in the past 10 years. So currently I'm working for a project called AirLab. It's a joint partnership between the Civil Aviation Authority of Singapore and Thales. It was established in Singapore in 2019. So we're about 5 years in this research lab, which is a quite unique opportunity and project as a public-private partnership with over 50 people in the lab from Singapore mostly, and also we have some people from overseas. And we look into the field of aviation for innovation, research, and development. And the lab is engaging over 4 streams of work, and we look to optimize aviation, which is, as Abby was mentioning, a part of the hard to abate sectors in terms of carbon removal or mitigation. So in terms of my job scope, so I'm as a chief product owner, I look after the aviation domain and technological roadmap of the lab. And so we define use cases with our partners, which are mainly the Aviation Authority of Singapore and also the aviation authorities in the Asia Pacific region, which is very dynamic in terms of aviation. So it's a great place to be, and we'll see that we have a lot of challenges to work on in the coming years. Yeah, so it's about me.
All right, thank you very much. So as you can see, our audience, you can see we have a wonderful panel. We are going to share with you their exciting experience, and I'm very sure you have a fairly fulfilling lunchtime today. Now, before we begin, let me bring this up. A little bit of a disclaimer. The webinar that we are now ongoing will be recorded for various purposes, and the copyright of this recording, as well as any associated write-up, will belong to NTU. So that's for your information. Okay, so let me take this down. Okay, and now we are back to full screen. All right, without further ado, I think we should go ahead with our first segment about our webinar discussion, which is about sustainable practices. Well, sustainability has sort of become the spotlight, in particular in Singapore. I guess a lot of us, when we are reading the news, we have heard about or read into the Long Island project that the government is going to invest a lot of money to basically creating additional pieces of land as a sort of like long-term protection for a little tiny island that could be under some threats, especially when there's global warming or environmental changes. So I would like to ask our panelists, and I shall start with AB. Can you share with us any additional insights or based on your experience with regards to issues such as sustainable practices, be it any events that you are related to in your job scope, or any other current events that you are basically investing into as well? AB, please.
Thanks, Ben, for the question. I fortunately work with a firm which is sort of in the forefront of implementing the sustainable practices and sustainable technologies. So I'll give you a brief overview of how we approach it as a firm as well. So we are divided into four global business units, essentially. So there is one on renewables, which essentially does large-scale renewable installation for different clients of ours, be it, it could be for a particular use case for on-site utilities, or it could be large-scale deployment as well. There is a large demand as the grid takes more and more renewables. There is obviously a huge need for batteries and battery-related research as well as battery-related implementation. So we have a business unit which takes care of the flexible generation and flexible topics in which we need the grid and the battery support as well. We have here in Singapore primarily a business unit which works for energy solutions, which is essentially pre-packaged solutions which take into account a lot of different sustainable solutions together to optimize the solution and give it to the client essentially. And then we have also businesses around. So all of the businesses I've told so far mostly relate to electrons, which we are talking about the renewable electricity. But then we also work in gases, which is also one of the topics to be considered in sustainability and sustainable practices moving forward for the industry, where we are trying to implement green gases as well. So it's sort of a holistic portfolio to include a lot of sustainability related issues and trying to look at it comprehensively. NG as a company looks at it in a technology agnostic way. So what we're trying to do is bringing a lot of sustainable solutions together, trying to see which is the best, putting them together and offering it for different clients or different services. In addition, I think, we have obviously ambitious targets. So digital solutions also come into picture to solve all of them. And I'm sure we'll have more discussion around that as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And that is very interesting to me because I don't think I know a lot about chemistry and petrochemicals. So a very dumb question. You mentioned about green gases. How is it different from any other kind of gases that we are using now?
Yes. So essentially what it means is that we are creating gases through green routes. So for example, if you want to create ammonia, instead of doing it by the conventional processes, which are based on fossil fuels, we try to get green hydrogen. We make that green hydrogen through water and combine it to make the e-ammonia, what we would call. And that could be potentially used in, for example, maritime application. So the idea here is to go all the way green, make the processes green, but at the same time, you have to optimize because right now the availability. So I think currently the status is in a research phase and a little bit of an implementation phase as well. But we are trying to, I think, green the supply chains also and also create the supply chains which don't exist. But yes, the idea of green gases is to make the whole, make the reliance on fossil fuels much lesser.
I see. Thank you very much for teaching me about that. And that sounds like a perfect linkage to our next panelist, Eugenia. But just now we talk about green chemicals, green gases, and basically we try to remove the carbon footprint as much as possible. I may be understanding it wrong, so do correct me if that's the case. In any case, share with us with regards to any finance related or bank related sustainable practices that you have been exposed to, and let us learn about that.
Yeah, sure. So I guess for us in banking, there are two big areas. We finance a lot of these green practices. For what Abhiruchi was talking about, we've been looking quite a bit at, green hydrogen as an example. I think what's interesting is a lot of these technologies, while they're quite nascent but they're growing also quite exponentially. And so, increasingly, a lot of it is also becoming more and more bankable. What's interesting for Singapore, I guess, if we bring it to the Singapore context, is that if you think about the big trends in sustainability, we are also quite a big bunkering hub. So we have been seeing also within the small and medium enterprises, a growth of businesses, for instance, looking at processing used cooking oil, which then can be used to produce sustainable biofuels. And I think, as a bank, we come in to see how we can support some of that financing and how we can also partner clients in thinking about it. What's also important, I think, to highlight is that it's not just about the green businesses. I mean, a lot of businesses are in very traditional sectors, right? Be it in manufacturing, in cement, and how then do you get started? I think one kind of very practical ways in which businesses have started thinking about it is to just look at energy efficiency, right? So simple things from, being able to change, your light bulbs to more LED lighting can qualify, for instance, for a green loan, which then allows you to start pivoting your business in small ways. So you could be a small and medium enterprise, or you could be a big corporate get started. But I think kind of picking at the low-hanging fruits and then thinking about how you can get to the next step of decarbonizing is one very practical step that we see our clients do. And we work with them in terms of how we can come in to finance some of that pivot as well. I think for us broadly as a bank, Standard Chartered has a big presence across emerging markets. My coverage is across Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. And I think we're quite passionate about the fact that we need the whole economy to transition. So as we continue to support all of the green businesses, how can we help really the brown get to the green? And how can we think about transition in a real tangible way from, the technologies that can help businesses transition, but also for them to tap into the financing, because there is a clear $1 trillion gap in financing the transition, which I think involves everyone coming together to help move the entire society around so that we can get to net zero.
Fantastic, Eugenia. Thank you very much for telling us about green financing supporting this green transformation in Asia and beyond. So just a very quick follow-up questions. You mentioned about Asia and within Southeast Asia, for example, in particular, which I think a lot of our audience are from. There are many countries, basically, there's also huge diversity, be it economic progress, development, as well as the kind of business activities that each of these countries are into. So to this end, considering this diversity with regards to financing for green transformation and conversion and so on, do you see any challenges as well as opportunities? Let us know.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think, some of the challenges still include the cost of technology and also where the regulatory support is. What's encouraging, though, is across Southeast Asia, you see that governments have made net zero commitments. And actually, it is the net zero commitments of both countries as well as companies that is driving a lot of that shift towards sustainability and sustainable practices. But I think, in the market, there is more guidance that some of the companies are looking for, which would then help them consider making that pivot. The cost of technology is definitely something that still remains a barrier. If I take the steel industry, for instance, if you look at green steel, the technologies involved in being able to achieve green steel is still very expensive for a lot of the top steel producers, for instance, in Indonesia, right? Coal is one that is pretty controversial. I think what's encouraging about coal is that actually Singapore and the MAS has quite a bit of thought leadership around how we can help with the coal transition. And from an opportunity perspective, there is the area of carbon credits and, the latest being transition credits, which is if you can help a coal plant commit to an early decommission, which really affects many of our coal kind of companies out here in the region, then they can qualify to be incentivized with transition credits. And the MAS has said that then they can be an off-taker of those credits. So I think carbon markets is an area to watch as well, very relevant for Indonesia, for Malaysia. We work with many of our private banking clients who might own land, agriculture, to think about how they can also look at carbon markets as an additional revenue stream for their businesses that they are currently already working on.
Thank you very much for the tip in terms of where the growth opportunities are going to be. All right, and Frank, our gentleman. Earlier, we have talked about the chemical side of things, which is about production of energy sources of those. Later, Eugenia shared with us with regards to the financing part of it, the bank's involvement in terms of propelling those transformation. Now, our audience probably also know this very well. Well, Singapore is an air hub, basically. Aerospace industry is certainly one of the main pillar for our GDP growth, as well as creating a lot of jobs. Around this area, in terms of aerospace in particular, let us know and share with us what do you see in terms of sustainable practices, its implications, its impact, and probably some potential. Let us know.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Ben. Yeah, I think you pitch it very well. The aerospace industry is not only allowing traffic of passengers and shipments, but it's also leading the way to a whole industry and to the ecosystem in Singapore and wider Asia Pacific. So I wanted to take this time to give you a glimpse into this very interesting industry. Which has obviously a lot of implications with regards to net zero and sustainability targets. So aviation is actually responsible for about 3% of global CO2 emissions. So that's quite significant. And the issue or the roadmap forward is that we expect the number of passengers currently flying is going to double in the next 20 years. So reducing the number of flights is actually not really the option or the scenario that we foresee, even though perhaps we try to, as travelers and passengers, reduce the number of flights that we do personally and professionally. It's still expected to double in the next 20 years. So with that given, we need to find ways to decrease the impact of aviation in order to meet the net zero targets for 2050. So that's what I mean. Aviation is known as a hard to abate sector. We've said it already, and it's mainly due to the high energy density that is required. I mean, you need a lot of energy in order to fly from point A to point B, and the big hits and the highest impact is on your long haul flights. Regional aviation is not on short hauls or relatively short, low impact. Whereas your long hauls is really where you have your big hits, as we call it. So to give you an idea, flying from Paris to Singapore, if you take a medium or heavy carrier, it's going to use about 100 metric tons of jet fuel, and that will emit about 300 tons of CO2. So that's just one flight, 300 tons of CO2. And then maybe you know how many flights we have a day, and the number is actually mind-boggling. So all of these flights are not long haul, but we have roughly, on average, about 100,000 flights in every given day. 100,000. So you can't multiply this 100,000 by 100 tons because they're not all long haul flights. But you get the idea that there's obviously a huge amount of CO2 and jet fuel burn due to everyday's flights. So how can we mitigate this footprint? And this is really the challenges posed to the aviation sector. And there are basically three ways to reduce the impact of aviation, and we need to work on all three of these. All of these approaches to reduce CO2 emissions of the aviation sector. So I'll give you the list of these three approaches, and then I'll explain how each can be approached. What are the advantages and downsides for each one? So the first way to address it is through the propulsion means. And so by propulsion means, we have different approaches. Either we go to electric or hydrogen power aviation, or we change the type of jet fuel that we use. Okay, so that's the first type. It's basically the propulsion means. The second type of optimization is on the fleet modernization, which means that we use more recent aircraft, and here we can get a performance gain in terms of efficiency. And so we tap into some savings there. And the third approach is through operational improvements, basically changing how efficient air traffic can be. So let me dive into these three one by one. So the propulsion means, the fleet, and the operations. So in terms of propulsion, I mentioned about electric and hydrogen aviation. The main downside with that is that the technology is very nascent, and we're still very far away from having long-haul flights using this technology. And the main challenge is with creating and certifying the technology so it's safe. I mean, we do have people in the aircraft, so by the time this technology is safe and usable, it will be probably, I don't want to give specific numbers, but at least 10 to 20 years. And if we project to our carbon targets for 2050, 20 years is actually a very large part of the time we have left. So the main drawbacks are the time to develop, certify, the energy density. I mean, the amount of batteries that you would need to fly an A380, so a large aircraft between Singapore and Paris, for instance, is about the weight of the aircraft itself. So at the moment, with current battery technology, it's not viable. Oh, all right, so that's for hydrogen and electric. We see that we have a lot of challenges, which is why most of you must have heard about what we call SAF, or sustainable aviation fuel. This is one of the key approaches to abate carbon in the aviation industry. We have different types of sustainable aviation of SAFs. The first one is really called the sustainable aviation fuel, but we also have synthetic aviation fuel, or even eSAF. The main one you've probably heard about is sustainable aviation fuel, which is basically biofuel. So it's produced from biomass and from waste. The second one is called synthetic aviation fuel. This one is basically chemically produced from green hydrogen and carbon dioxide, and eSAF is pretty much the same. They just differ in the production means. So the downside with sustainable aviation fuel is that it basically competes with food security, and it has a high need for land and water. So in order to produce a lot of sustainable aviation fuel, you need to compete with to maintain priority over air transportation. It's also at the moment very expensive. So we're looking at, the industry is looking at ways to reduce the cost of sustainable aviation fuel, but at the moment, the cost itself is a huge challenge. And there's also obviously for synthetic aviation fuel and eSAF, there's a competition with the energy sector. We also need energy for other means, and using it to produce fuel can be a challenge. So SAF is still one of the key ways to abate carbon in this industry. We see that there are some challenges, and the industry is working to mitigate these challenges. But SAF is probably one of the best ways to reduce carbon. So that's what we foresee in terms of development in the coming 10 to 20 years. All right, so I'll move on now to the fleet modernization, which can allow up to 30% reduction. The range is generally 20 to 30%, so it's quite significant. So how do we achieve this reduction? So obviously modernized fleet, so you need to change the aircraft to the most recent. On the most recent aircraft, you have better aerodynamics, lighter materials, advanced engine technology, advanced avionics. All of this allows you to gain this 30% emissions, which is quite significant. Combined with sustainable aviation fuel, you can get to some really interesting level of reductions. The downsides is that obviously you need to renew your fleet. Time on the operational lifetime, is about 20 years. So between 10 and 20 years, that's the time that you need to renew your fleet. So some aircraft that have been renewed 5 years ago, for instance, well, you probably need to wait another 15 years before it's economically viable to replace them. So there is this challenge. So obviously it's an asset intensive way to reduce carbon. Okay, so that's for synthetic aviation fuel and fleet modernization. So lastly, the last point I wanted to touch on, and this is where technology and digitization will have a big impact, is in operational improvements. And this is mainly we're working together with the aviation authorities in the region and with Thales Group. So what are these operational improvements? So it's basically looking at your end-to-end flight from the departure gate all the way to the arrival gate, and we call this trajectory-based operations. We're trying to make the whole journey between these two gates as efficient as possible. And areas we're looking at are, for instance, the taxiing time, leaving the gate and starting the engines as late as possible, and making sure that when the aircraft pushes back, it's actually ready to go, and it doesn't need to hold before it can depart or take off. That's basically time where the aircraft is burning fuel, so we want to minimize that. Also, in terms of flight trajectories, so we look to optimize the climbing phase, the cruising phase, and the descent phase. So it's actually quite complex, and there is a lot of potential to be gained there. So these are areas that we're really actively working, and I'll touch on a little bit later on how digital technology allows us to help in this area. The last area where we can improve it operationally is in terms of arrivals. So coordinating arrivals into an airport is quite challenging. You might have experienced holding patterns or delays as you were flying into Singapore, because density is quite high and there can be some delays. Whenever an aircraft is delayed, we're obviously burning a lot of fuel in the air, because we always need to fight against the gravity, which is one of the givens in aviation. Once we have the wheels up, we're always fighting against gravity. That's physics, and we cannot not do anything about it. So we want to improve the efficiency of arrivals. Okay, so in order to tap into these operational improvements, there are challenges, and there's also advantages over the other ways to improve. So the challenges is that we need a high level of collaboration and cooperation between the countries in order to optimize flights from gate to gate. Obviously, we're never flying to Singapore, from Singapore to Singapore. So whenever we're flying outside of Singapore, we need to cooperate with countries around, such as Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, China, etc. And currently, there are limited ways of collaborating in air traffic management and aviation in the region. This is a big difference to Europe and to the United States of America, where you have the FAA and Eurocontrol looking after this coordination. So this is where we want to develop collaboration in the region in order to really tap into these operational gains. So that's one first challenge, but it can be addressed and it can be improved. So yeah, Asia Pacific is also quite fragmented. We have very technology savvy countries such as Singapore that are very keen to invest and develop into technologies, and other countries who are less advanced and more limited in terms of technological capabilities and also procurement capabilities. So everyone needs to work together, and this is one of the challenges that we need to address. At the moment, there's relatively limited accountability in terms of the efficiency of the domain. And I'm speaking of regional level, not necessarily country by country, but at a regional level, there's really no regulatory framework or overarching infrastructure or authority that looks into this, which makes life a little bit more difficult in order to tap into these optimization. Lastly, in terms of advantages for operational improvements, the key aspects is that improving operations is something that can be factored across the whole domain, and it doesn't need an asset-intensive solution. Improving process is basically the way aircraft fly, and the infrastructure that you need to support that can be quite asset light, especially in the world of digital technology, where we can leverage cloud technology in order to do this optimization, share information, and collaborate better. So we'll be, I think, discussing this a little bit later. So once the technology is deployed, the marginal cost is actually quite low. So the challenge is to really disrupt this way of non-collaboration into a collaborative means of improvements in terms of operational efficiency. So that's our challenge for the aviation sector.
All right, thank you very much. That is really a lot that you have shared with us, and a lot of insights as well. Thank you so much. And you just provided us with the perfect hook for the next bit of today's webinar, which is about sustainability in the digital era. Well, as you have mentioned, indeed, technologies, and in particular, probably digital technologies, can be quite helpful and instrumental in terms of overcoming various challenges which you have mentioned, and also our panelists, and recognizing or realizing some of the opportunities. I guess a lot of our audience probably have already heard or used AI, machine learning, automation, and so on, not just within the banking sector, aviations, or chemicals. Basically, in normal lives, we are probably already getting impacted by all this technology. So in the next bit, we are going to spend some time with our panelists looking into how we can use digital technologies or any other form of technologies to basically help us to overcome and better able to realize all this potential when we are transforming to a more sustainable economy as well as market. So let us start from the very front, the very first panelist that we have today. AB, can you share with us within your domain, what are some of the interesting and exciting things that you can tell us about with regards to digitization and sustainability, please?
Definitely, Ben. as you rightly pointed out just now, the digitization is not limited to a sector. It's really a transversal pillar that goes all across the sector and implementation of sustainable practices, literally across all sectors. So that being said, I'll try to focus more on the more generic manufacturing operational entity that I represent, so that we can have that insight from the sector itself. So the most important peck of the puzzle in sustainable practices is in terms of what we stand for in terms of renewable energy is the renewable energy implementation itself. So a lot of management of the most important part of that will be the management of the grid itself. So a lot of digital solutions for maintenance and deployment itself. Energy management in terms of it's also very crucial from the point of view of different use cases that we are dealing with. So energy management system for a cooling network will be very different from utilities contract with a company versus for probably a data center, which requires a different sort of optimization of energy. So a lot of digital tools to cater to the use cases, which are super important in the digital domain, to be developed as the grid gets more and more complex. Now I'll take a bit of a step back in how manufacturing projects are actually designed and how digital solutions can come in at every point in time in the lifetime of it, really. So the projects, of course, could be greenfield or brownfield. So the digital solutions that you're using for a greenfield or a brownfield project will be slightly different. For greenfield, obviously, you start with the design. So you are designing the project from the very fundamentals. So where the digital tools can come into where can be in terms of raw material choice, sustainable supply chain design, very important part of that as well, and of course the design of the actual process and the products as well, which can come in through a lot of new digital tools and techniques that are coming in. Right now we are for sustainability, the fundamental, I think, tenets we all use, which are overused probably, but which are very, very important, are, reduce, reuse, recycle. So once we are, the project is up and running, and there are considerations of the end of the life as well. So we need to make sure that the waste management, in whatever format it is, if it is actual waste, in terms of physical waste, that has to be reused, and digital solutions are very important for that. At the same time, if we are using it for example, something like a cold recovery from a plant where there is excessive cold, so that can be also called as a waste. Again, the digital solutions are important to take into account this and manage this sort of extra energy or extra material that we are getting out of a manufacturing plant or a utilities plant. In addition to it, I think from ENGIE's perspective, I dug up a little bit of details of exactly what sort of digital solutions are we implementing, not only here, but across the globe, to sort of have a very broad perspective of what we are using currently already. So we have something called, we have several tools. So I think the positioning is from the point of view of using digital tools for accelerated solutions, for accelerating the sustainability even more. And one of the tools is for optimizing the management of heating and cooling networks, for improving, performance of complex assets. And the benefit that we get out of it, what Eugenia also said before, in terms of energy efficiency, is almost 3 to 5% on a daily basis. So that's a huge sort of improvement to add. We also have a lot of predictive maintenance solutions for thermal assets, for refrigeration as well, which use machine learning and different techniques as well. We also have developed smart O&Ms. Smart O&Ms meaning O&Ms which can improve the equipment performance drastically, which are interconnected with all the other equipment, probably formation of digital twins, so that we can have predictive control, we can have more smarter control on the assets that we have, we can foresee what are the issues that might come up. We also have a lot of solutions for comprehensive solutions for residential users. There are a lot of energy sources and a lot of things that we use as energy at home as well. And our responsibility is to also make sure that we are empowered to sort of reduce our own personal footprint. So there are a lot of things that are provided as a residential user as well for this. From the research perspective, which I belong to the entity, and which is more forward-looking than the predictive controls and the operations that we are already doing, is from the point of view of right now two main, I think, focus areas we have as a firm is one, energy management system, as I said, for different use cases that we are seeing, right from hydrogen to data centers to on-site utilities for different applications. And the second is the use of generative AI. So generative AI we have, I think, identified around 200 use cases, and we are right now piloting around 12 of them. And some of them are around health and safety, to some of them are about automating some of the practices in terms of maintenance, in terms of manuals that we have for maintenance. So these are the sort of array of digital solutions that really augment and really make a case for accelerated adoption of sustainability, and it literally, I think, it can be implemented from the initial part when the project is only on paper to the end of life, which we call, as so circularity concepts. All the way, digital solutions are essential. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. That is indeed fantastic. And you just shared with us with regards to the research side of it, which I think all our audience benefited a lot to hear about how you folks are looking into using technologies to optimize or basically to enable energy management at a large scale, at a grid level, as well as lower individualized level. And you also mentioned the buzzword, basically, generative AI as well, with regards to facilitating the automation of some of those practices. So it is fantastic to know. Up next, Eugenia, once again, to share with us your experience and your knowledge around the bank sectors, for example, with regards to what is the role of technology, maybe particular digitization in terms of sustainability practices that you have experience in.
Yeah, I'll take it from the investments and the product side of things. Even though as a bank, we do adopt a number of technologies as well to, increase efficiencies, as Abhi was talking about. But I think more importantly, what's been really interesting is that we see a lot of kind of like big AI, machine learning, really helping solve for some of the challenges when it comes to ESG data. So, if you've studied, sustainable finance or sustainable investing, you will know that data quality and just data availability is a challenge when it comes to looking at either investment products or sometimes also financing, because that data is not standardized. Often, it's difficult to really quantify or track. And what we've seen is that technology has come in to really help that space grow. I wouldn't say that we are at a point whereby we see standardized data yet, or where we're in the holy grail of kind of really like huge high levels of data quality. But I think that the role that technology and digitized solutions have really played is that they have enabled that to grow even further, so that there is slightly better confidence around just the data that is being looked at, that's being analyzed. You have stuff like satellite technology that can also inform asset managers of some of what they're being told, for instance, by the investee companies, right? Because they can actually see the exact spots of the factories, of the plantations, and where, they can dive deeper into either the emissions level or even sometimes the biodiversity kind of challenges where those spots are. So I think all of those is really interesting because it's just enabling better data quality. That's one. The other area is that you see that also from a product's perspective, you have digital solutions that are leading to product innovation. So as a tangible example, in some parts of the West, they have smart meters that they have installed in households, and essentially you can have either kind of a loan or mortgage that is linked to energy efficiency. So essentially, as you install that smart meter and as you provide that data to your banks on how you are reducing the energy consumption over time, you just get better pricing for loans. And so, I think very practical ways of how digital solutions are also really helping consumers get onto the bandwagon of sustainability. Sometimes it can be quite a big concept and, people don't know where to start, but, being able to merge that with tangible financial incentives, financial products, that helps towards the overall decarbonization.
All right, thank you very much. And that is something very refreshing to me indeed, because I do look into like smart meters and all those technologies to try to shape, more encourage consumer behavior such as energy usage. And I think you hit the sweet spot with what you say just now, which is about if the bank is aware, or the energy providers basically is aware about the reduction effort that has been put into usage electricity, for example, then the consumer probably will get better pricing. And this is quite the contrast with with the standard practice that we have now, whereby you are basically punished to some extent. The more that you use, the more that you pay. So I guess that is very, very effective. And as you have mentioned, certainly a lot of organizations will have a very key role to play. All right, finally, Frank, it's your turn now. Tell us more about, and basically extending to whatever that you have just ended with earlier, the role of digitization in your areas. Share with us your exciting story.
Yeah, look, absolutely, Prof. Ben. So it's interesting. I think there's many parallels between what Abby and Eugenia were saying. And in terms of what I was sharing on the operational improvements, we basically rely on two big disruptors or digital concepts, which are this concept of digital twin and also on high quality data. So both were mentioned previously. So touching back on these operational improvements for the sector, so the main pain points that we have also in terms of management of air traffic is similar to the fleet of the aircraft. We also have long service life in traditional systems, in the systems that do manage air traffic. So, for instance, Singapore is running air traffic management. It's a Thales solution, and it was provided in the 2010s. And it's basically a traditional system. So you have huge servers running on premise. It's a monolithic system, and it has a long life. So how do you disrupt operations when you're running on this type of solution is one of the pain points that we want to address, and for which digital technology is helping us. And the second point is with the region and how to bring these solutions towards the region where, well, we obviously mentioned the fact that it was fragmented in terms of technology and procurement. So digital technology also allows an asset light solution, and basically any country in the world to log into thanks to the internet and internet connections to log into a central or distributed solution in order to work collaboratively. So this is basically the approach that we took starting in 2019 when the Air Lab was started. So we started by developing digital services and a digital twin, which we call the ATM twin. So ATM is for air traffic management. So we made a twin of the system, and this allowed us to, using these technologies, to leverage data. So this twin is fed by real-time data. So right now it's being fed by current data, and it allows us to prototype new solutions and new concepts off the loop. So basically, we have the real system running, and we have the twin in the cloud, in which we can perform prototyping, investigation, research, innovation, develop really these new collaborative concepts, and allow to be doing this in a collaborative way. So that's thanks to the approach of digital twin, which we developed in the past years, allowing prototyping and development at high speed, on service-based and cloud infrastructure. We do have a lot of data that come from, for instance, you might know Flight Radar 24. I mean, this gives us a global view of air traffic. We have this source as well as more specialized sources. But I mean, the quantity of data that we can tap in nowadays is absolutely huge. And the challenge is not anymore really getting the data. It's more, once you have these terabytes of data in real time flowing in, what can you do with it? And this is really where our services technology based on ATM Twin, and we're looking into AI ML to really extract the trends out of this environment in order to formulate some improvements. So we basically have an approach which is first to analyze the data, then we modelize new concepts, and then we trial these. So we often have this three-step phase where we measure, we change, and we measure again in the improvements. And there we can basically have this loop of continuous improvement, which is allowed by digital technology. So our solutions are developed around this in order to incrementally bring new changes. So I mean, in terms of technology, everything runs in the cloud, so it's very easy to change, deploy, and make it available to all stakeholders. And we're working with the ecosystem, so including with NTU. They have a ATM Research Institute. So I mean, we're working in Singapore with many startups and research institute. And this is also the benefit of the digital technologies, is that we're able to bring together all these people very easily in a matter of seconds. Experiment on common things. And so basically our hopes going forward with this with this digital technology is to really leverage it on a regional scale, to use a virtualized system, cloud-based, that will help us do cross-border collaboration. So it's based on it's a service-based operating model. Obviously, there's a lot of cybersecurity questions, but this is something that we manage. We all heard about the recent disruptions. I believe it was last week. So cybersecurity and keeping the systems running is always key. So that's one of the aspects we look into. And so basically this is our solution in order to tap into all these operational improvements. So we're in the process of developing more of a regional platform, and so we hope to embark more of the region in the coming months and years on this platform in order to really leverage the power of digitization in order to create these optimizations. So time is running fast, and we need to act now in order to address our goals in terms of carbon mitigation by 2050. So we're basically on board and working every day in that using this type of technology.
Indeed, time flies when we have important and societally important targets to help to achieve. So thank you very much for sharing your experience and your knowledge with us, and also with our audience. So to all who are watching, we are now reaching the final bit of this webinar, which is our Q&A. There is a little Q&A button there for you to key in your questions. We don't have a lot of time left, but if you do have any questions, please feel free to key that in. I can see that there are a couple of interesting ones. Let me try to combine them and ask our panelists. So Frank, you ended up with the impact or the power of digitization. You talk about the technologies that can be useful and impact the region at large. So we have a couple of questions with regards to some of the sustainability or sustainable practices or technologies that are well practiced or established in Singapore. How do you see some of those that can be transferred or localized and implemented in the surrounding countries in the region?
So I think what's remarkable in Singapore is the country's investment on technology, and it's and the way it's actually addressing the problem. And first of all, realizing the problem of carbon emissions and all the sustainability topics, and really building a long-term roadmap in terms of ways to address it. So this relies on innovation, accountability, and willpower to improve this. So there's the technology itself and what they've achieved throughout the investment and development of these technologies that the region can really take a benefit from by following Singapore as a role model. But I think it's a lot in terms of attitude, in terms of really stopping and thinking how we can really tap into these improvements in a way that involves not only the country but the region. So I think that's quite remarkable in Singapore through its investment continuously in order to bring about this change. So if there's something that the region should take out of this, I would recommend this, really the focus on the innovation side and investing to bring forward this technology and its benefits.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, I think we have time for one more question, and I can see this appearing quite a number of times. And I think AB will be the best person among the panel to answer this question. So I think our audience are interested to understand about the myth that sustainable technology itself, is it sustainable? So I think generally they are asking that, like, you're creating new gases, but the creation of it requires energy as well. And sometimes maybe we are wrong. It might involve even more energy in this extraction or creation compared to the existing and traditional practices. Enlighten us, maybe.
I think it's a very valid question to ask, and the skeptics are right about certain parts of it, for sure. So I think how it works is we need all the solutions for decarbonization. Whatever is available, we need all of them. It's not one solution fits all. So there is a space for everything. I think a lot of criticism has been there around probably hydrogen, for example. It's a very good use case to use for this, explaining this. So I think what's important here is that, yes, the process itself is very intensive, and from the technology perspective, there is a lot happening to decarbonize it as much as possible. It has a geographic significance. Whenever you want to implement something like that, which is energy intensive, which is an alternative method, because hydrogen eventually is going to feed into the green gases and green feedstocks. But making hydrogen itself, if it is very energy intensive, it's a problematic proposition. So you have to think about it from the perspective of where it is made, obviously it should be at a place where the renewable sources are plenty, so that the hydrogen made is completely green in that context. Where do you use it? You don't want to use it for everything. There are quite a lot of uses of hydrogen which are researched and which are very well known, but where do you use it is where there is for example, the hard to abate sector, to create, for example, direct reduced iron for the steel industry, which is where there is no other alternative to be used. So there is a place for it to be used. There are very specific uses where it can be, where it is essential to decarbonize. And there are several technologies like this. There will be obviously a discussion about solar panels, why there are rare materials in there which are finite in the world and which definitely need to be conserved in the long term. So how do we address it? We have several technologies coming up for solar panels. The efficiencies have improved greatly in the last 10 years. Are they going to be a one-on-one replacement? No. But how can it be addressed is to expand so there are, now there are bifacial, there are perovskites, there are organic PVs which can be used on facades of buildings, for example. So you increase the surface area. The moment you have a flexible PV, you increase the surface area that could be used for PV. So then the overall requirement can be managed. So I think technology has to be looked at in a very I think in addition to it, there is so I think the technology has to be looked at it in a way where we are using it at the right places, where the resources are correct, where it is truly renewable, and the application is correct. And there is plenty to go around. I really am a believer in technology, and I think there are so many that if we have the right combination of it and we choose wisely, it should be a good solution.
All right, thank you very much for enlightening us. So that is very important. And if I shall try to summarize and conclude, basically the future is bright. There are challenges, of course, and there are opportunities. And what's most important is that we need to arm and have access to the right knowledge, such that we can become innovative, we can solve the problems, and we can also be very creative along the way. So for now, you should be able to see on your screen that is a little QR code directing our audience to complete a survey. Your responses to this is very important to us, such that we can learn from your comments and suggestions to further improve our webinar, which obviously our objective is to try to reach out to everyone and to share our knowledge. So with that, we have reached the very end of this webinar session for today's lunchtime. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for your time, for speaking to our audience, and for our audience, thank you so much to be with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.